Welcome to In-House Legal Uncovered, a Major Lindsay and Africa podcast exploring what it takes to make it in-house.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of a new season of In-House Legal Uncovered in 2024. My name is Michael Sachs. I'm the host of this podcast, and I'm a partner at Major Lindsay and Africa and our in-house counsel recruiting group. My practice is helping to conduct general counsel searches and other senior level in-house searches for all types of companies. As always, the theme of this podcast is candid and engaging conversations with leading individuals in the legal industry. Last year, we talked to several general counsels who had unique backgrounds and unique takes on the legal industry and where it is going. We also talked to a CHRO. We talked to a head of career services at a top 10 law school, and we rounded out the year with a very vibrant MLA roundtable. In season 2, so to speak, we're going to continue along that same journey, but probably with some new angles that we didn't explore in season 1. All right, with that out of the way, I want to introduce our first guest of the season, and I'm so excited to talk to her for many reasons. One key reason I'll explain in a minute or two, but please say hello to Paulette Dodson. Paulette, welcome to the In-House Legal Uncovered podcast.
I love being here. Thanks, Mike.
Absolutely. All right, let me just, before we get to the Q&A, let me tell folks a little bit about your background. First, Paulette is a very active board member. Her impressive board affiliations include her appointment to the board of directors of Portillo's, Inc., a renowned fast casual restaurant chain known for its Chicago-style menu, which I've gone to many, many, many times. I might have just ordered from there last week, as well as Trupanion, a well-known pet insurance provider. And additionally, she has served on the board of directors of Mather since 2011, where she currently chairs the corporate governance committee and is a member of the executive committee. Previously, Paulette had a very successful in-house legal career. She served as a general counsel and corporate secretary of Alight, Inc., a global human capital and business solutions provider. Her strategic leadership was pivotal in guiding that organization through enterprise-wide business initiatives, legal operations, and large-scale transformations. Before Alight, Paulette served as the senior vice president and general counsel and corporate secretary of PetSmart, Inc., where she guided the board and company through leadership changes and a leveraged buyout. And she also held various roles at Sara Lee Corporation, including GC corporate secretary and chief counsel for North America. And before Sara Lee, you worked at Tribune Company, Paulette, and that's where you and I met.
That's right. It was a terrific part of my career.
So Paulette, so just to say, because you and I have laughed about it a lot, so Paulette was my first, you can't see her laughing because this is all audio, but Paulette was my first boss in the legal industry. I applied for an in-house job between my first year and second year in law school, and I interviewed with Paulette, and she asked me whether or not I liked law school or not, and I sarcastically and stupidly answered, I hate it. And Paulette, I guess, loved that answer because you hired me, and I think we had a very fun summer together, and we've been buddies ever since. So hopefully, you don't have to tell me I was your best hire ever at the Tribune Company, but at least tell me you enjoyed the summer with me.
Oh, we had a great time. I think I even made you work on July 4th or something like that.
I think you might have. You didn't have to push me very hard. It was a lot of. I actually have very, very fond memories from that. I do think the job wasn't you, but the job was minimum wage, and then you gave me a raise to like $7 an hour, which was great, by the way, and also a lesson to people that sometimes you got to start at the bottom and kind of work your way up. And honestly, in all seriousness, that job was very helpful because I used that in my interviews when I interviewed at law firms to kind of tell them that I already had this in-house experience and built on that and got a job at a great firm doing media law for a while and ultimately worked at NBC. So that summer was actually incredibly helpful. So thank you very much for hiring me, by the way. I don't know if I've ever thanked you.
I'm glad. I'm so proud of where you are now and what you did with that little summer.
All right, well, let's get to you. So let's just start with like an easy one. Just I gave the people a little bit of your background, but just, how'd you get from kind of there at the beginning to here? Just maybe walk us through, in your own words, kind of the breadth of your career, your elevator speech, so to speak.
Yeah, so I started out as a corporate lawyer in a big law firm, actually in Minnesota. It's where my husband and I could both get jobs because we were sick of doing the long distance thing. And after a few years there, decided to move to Chicago to be with his family and started working at the Tribune. newspapers are unique animals in that you get this really broad experience in all sorts of businesses. If you think about a newspaper business and you break it down, it's a distributor. It's of a very highly perishable business, so you have to be able to think on your feet and react to day-to-day issues. It's a print facility, so it's really manufacturing. So there were a ton of contractual issues, trademark, all of that. So if you think about the parts of the Tribune, it'll explain, in addition to the editorial stuff, which was obviously pretty fun and exciting, but it's a real business. And so I was able to leverage that to go to a place like Sara Lee, big food manufacturer. I went there as North America Chief Counsel. And I was lucky enough to work. We'll talk a little bit about mentorship, but I had some really amazing mentors there who saw potential. And I became general counsel when our general counsel decided to move on.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. Let's even take a step back to a little bit. Like, when did you even decide you wanted to become a lawyer? Or like, when did that? Did you always know that? Maybe you always knew that.
Yeah, I didn't always know it, but I knew I wanted to. I think the initial impression of most lawyers is that we're cynical. But in our hearts, we're really true believers, and we can be a little naive about it. We want to do the right thing. And that's where the need and the desire to become a lawyer, came about. I wanted to make a difference. I knew I had enough intellectual power to do it. I love to read and learn new things, and I felt like being a lawyer, I take the profession and our objectives really seriously, probably too seriously in some settings. But I believe we're here to make a difference. We're here to lead and change, make right the wrongs, and that's what caused me to become a lawyer.
So you already kind of alluded to the mentorships. I mean, I know some of the people you've worked with and for over the years, but maybe tell us maybe whether it's earlier in your career, or I think it's Sara Lee, or even Tribune, or wherever, or even recently. Who are those?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. When you think about it, I mean, there are mentors come in all shapes and sizes and forms. If I think about my time at the Tribune, the first person who told me I could be a general counsel was a guy named Dale Cohen. He's a professor now out in California, but I literally laughed my head off when he said that. I just did not see it. The other person I think made me a really good lawyer while I was at the Tribune, and I still think about the things he reminded me of, was Jim Clank, who was at Sun and Shine at the time. When I went to Sara Lee, Bret Hart took me under his wing. Rick Palmore was the general counsel. There are people out in our community that well, Andy Zopp, folks like that, who are willing to take a phone call and tell you you're not crazy. I've been really lucky to work with outside counsel, Tom Cole, others who saw my potential and was willing to be a real listening, a place for listening and a place for me getting better and understanding the role.
As a total aside, I'm sure you don't remember, but for me, it meant a lot. That summer, you took me to an oral argument that Jim was doing on behalf of Tribune. And it was probably the first time I'd heard an oral argument. And I'm sure you don't remember any of this. I don't remember the case at all, but the judge was very skeptical of Jim's arguments and kind of hit him over the head. And Jim just had a great reaction. And he pivoted and went right to his second arguments. And I learned a lot, just literally. I still think of that, 30 years later. And so I can see why he'd be a really good mentor on those kind of things too.
Yeah, I think it was an appellate case. That was a case I'll never forget, actually. So,
well, you remember it. Okay, you do remember it. Yeah.
I do remember it.
You'll remember the facts. I don't remember the facts.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you too. I mean, you mentioned how Dale mentioned you could become a GC one day, which you did. I mean, those skills. I mean, you've achieved that level where other people have not. But just what are those skills you think either Dale recognized or you recognized that said you could get this? Were those skills that you kind of built up over time? Were they more just innate to who you are? Maybe talk about that a little bit.
So I think as lawyers, and at least for me, I'm an immigrant. So for me, I was very focused on whether I was good at my profession. Do I understand the cases? Can I express it? Can I do the things that, you think being a lawyer involves? I think the best thing Dale did for me was tell me what I was really terrible at. And one of the things he told me
he probably enjoyed that.
Yeah. One of the things I was terrible at was explaining complex issues to business people. And the fact that I was terrible at it earlier because I was too focused on the technicalities, too focused on the interesting legal issues, really helped me become a general counsel, an effective general counsel. I hearkened back to it many, many times because one of the hardest things about being that first general counsel role is actually having to get the business people on side. And I have a trick that I share with folks all the time that I never, for the most part, I will try to stay away from things like liability, what judges will say, what courts will say, what cases say when I'm talking to business people. Really try to focus on what will make this right for our strategy. Either it's for the people who work there or otherwise. But I think Dale was excellent at giving me feedback that I didn't always want to hear. But when you think about what I was good at, I was good at learning. I would do my homework. I was willing to, when you're in house, you can't say, well, I'm a trademark lawyer. I can't go figure out how to draft this contract or figure out, and certainly not now when there's so many tools out there that can help. Being willing to take a risk and not be perfect at the particular skill set that you're being asked to do. I didn't manage litigation in the law firm, but by the time I left Tribune, I was really good at managing litigation in my mind and managing outside counsel. So I think being willing to stretch a little bit, ask for help, and figure out where you might be missing something.
Yeah, if I'll put a plug in too to say about you, even back then, you were always a crisp and clear communicator, and I mean that positively, like just a joy. And I know I'll say this to embarrass you a little bit. You're always very likable. You're just very, very likable. Like when there's people you work with, and it's like, oh, I'm not sure I really want to talk to this person. Well, I was like, oh, I'm really going to look forward to talking to Paulette about this. That's probably a really underrated skill.
It is. And I think lawyers might over lean sometimes on the content of it. What I think we have to understand is what we do can be a black box for people. And so being willing and able to kind of make it a little more transparent is always helpful.
So I hope this isn't a repetitive question, but when you did become the general counsel, then maybe what maybe surprised you there? Maybe you wish you'd known that. You got that job at Sara Lee, and all of a sudden you're thrown in. Were there surprises? What tell us about that?
There are always surprises. And for anybody who's going to walk into their first GC role, understand that there's always surprises. And I think the thing I underestimated is how much is on the shoulders of the GC. And maybe it's me, but I took it all very personally. If the company, I was at PetSmart when we were under an activist attack. I was the one who had to, help the executives not take it too personally. I was the one who had to help the board not take it too personally. And in a lot of ways, there's this great poem that's called The Bridge Called My Back. And in a lot of ways, the general counsel is the bridge between many, many stakeholders. When we were going through that particular crisis, I would only think of myself on my way home. On the way in, by then I would have gotten several calls from board members. While I was at work, I had to be available to my team while still focusing on the various things that needed to get done, whether it's with our investors or otherwise. And I think just keeping in mind that in a lot of ways you become, you know, the first line of defense on many things that might not even include that you can anticipate. So being flexible, and saving some time for yourself too, because we're only human. And during those really difficult times, sometimes people aren't thinking about you. Many times they're not thinking about the fact that it's hard for you too. And so be kind to yourself.
Yeah, I was going to ask. I mean, maybe the answer is just both. But when you got that, was it that you were just working more, or was it just like the not the stress, but just everything together was just weighed on you more, or was it just kind of everything and
No,
in
I
between?
think, as lawyers, we have experience, right? And we are the ones who have maybe the experience with boards before. At the time, there have been times when, I've worked with CEOs. This is their first CEO gig. I've seen a couple of CEOs, right, and worked with a board or with investors, with previous CEOs, and maybe they're relying on you to help them understand what their role is in that moment. And so I think that's what's hard is trying to empathize a lot about what they're feeling, and trying to provide them the advice they need, not just legal advice, but how to think about this moment in their career.
And I assume that when you have these new lawyers that have worked for you and you've hired or somebody else has hired, is that kind of when you try to give them that advice in terms of what the general counsel does, what their role is this is kind of how you describe what the GC does and what they should be preparing themselves for, if they're going to have a 20, 30 year, in-house career?
Yeah, definitely. That it's beyond just the stuff you put on the resume. It's really how you develop those partnerships throughout the organization. I mean, I've made some mistakes too, and I think trying to explain some of those mistakes to folks in a way that they can use them so they understand how it works. So, for example, I was at one company that hadn't built out their compliance program, and they were very mature, pretty mature company, and just hadn't done anything with it. In fact, they would, cheer on if their numbers were low. Which, so I got authorization from the board to build out this compliance program. So I thought that's all I needed. The board, the CEO. I was 3 months into it when our another executive vice president, who's on my team, on the senior team, says, "Why are we doing this?" Right. So I had pretty much spent 3 months getting nothing done because I hadn't brought the people at the table along with me and explained why it would be a good thing for the business, why it's a good thing for the people who work there, beyond, the SEC, beyond if you start the sentence with the federal sentencing guidelines, people are already shut down, right? So, tell them why their culture is going to be better if you implement the right programming. So having to, like I said, I think it might even go back to something as simple and human as empathy, just understanding where people are. Your priorities are not their priorities.
And that's right. I think a lot of people who go from law firms to in-house, because they've been successful at a law firm, maybe sometimes they just forget about these kind of things a little bit. And some of them, of course, are natural and they make that transition easily. But
Right.
For most people, it does not. You're going to make some mistakes along the way if you're not thinking through these things.
Yep, for sure.
So, when you were, when you worked with these CEOs over time, what kind of things did you kind of look for? What kind of relationships did you like seeing? Sounds like you had some really good relationships with the CEOs there, but like, what are those things that are just really valuable for a GC, and what are things that just might be something that might be a bit concerning, eyebrow raising? What have you seen over the years? And now, of course, you have the perspective of being a board member.
Yeah.
So
I think in the context of, interviewing for a general counsel role, for example, the first thing you want to see if there's, some way to determine integrity. If what there's, I think integrity is number one. It's so critical. I like plain speaking, when somebody will tell you the truth. It's easier to figure out where your role, how to do your job and how to serve. Um, the other thing I think that's important is, are you working with somebody who recognizes that people are the ones who deliver results? So that that strong people, having a strong people strategy. And honestly, the more time they spend with you, the more um, people they insist that you meet with during that process, the more that's a good thing. It might feel horrible at the time, like overkill, but it's a good thing. You're going to spend a lot of time with these folks, and them getting a chance to see you, and for you to see them is a good investment. It's a very expensive investment. Every half an hour that they spend with you, I didn't realize this until I went in house. Every half an hour that they spend is a half an hour they're not spending with their team. But if they think it's important enough for you to meet with all these folks, that's a good thing. That means that this is an important role to them, that you'll be included. You won't have to work too hard to show your value, because they've already shown that this is a valuable role.
So in other words, as opposed to maybe the CEOs where you interview with them and they kind of make a decision, you don't meet with everybody else.
Right.
And that's, somebody made this comment the other day at an event, which is like, when you're hired, you're not just hired to be the head of the legal department, you're really hired to be that member of the executive team at the end of the day. And probably
Right.
people underestimate those relationships with the other people on the executive team as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is definitely worthy of investment, because honestly, the CEO has other things to do, and he or she is going to tell the senior team, including your other colleagues sitting at the table, go get it done. And they're the ones who are, going to support you. And and they're the ones who you're going to put in front of the board, and you're going to be expected to support.
So there are a bunch of different reasons why I wanted to talk to you. Our past together definitely was one of them, but also, you're now becoming this active board member. And I have to say, I get a lot of emails and a lot of calls from really qualified and successful lawyers, and they want to become board members.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't know how to get started. They're not sure about it. So maybe, if you don't mind, taking us through a little bit of your own journey, like, how did that go? How, what did you do right? What did you do wrong? How, without getting into too many details, like, yeah, curious about
Sure.
that.
So I got introduced to my first board role, first paid board role. I've always been on not-for-profit boards throughout my career. I always thought, like I said at the beginning, it's important for us as lawyers to give back, and so that's been part of how I do that. But my first corporate board role came about because somebody I met and worked in a very disparate way. In other words, I didn't work very closely with him, called me up and said, hey, somebody's looking for a board member who has food background, and I really think you'd be great at it. I don't know how he knew that, but okay. And I took the call. And I had my initial meeting with the headhunter, the search firm, and I think she was a little skeptical about whether I'd get the role. But one thing she did say was, show your passion for the business. And it just so happens that I love to eat. And it was Portillo's, and a very beloved, I think you said it in the bio, it's a really beloved brand in Chicagoland. And so I did my homework, and I did not order a salad. Much to everybody's, traditional advice is order, things that are delicate and that you can eat, you can talk through, without your mouth being full and sloppy and messy. And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm going to order what I like. And so I ordered this very messy chicken sandwich. And the CEO still talks about the fact that he loved that. He said, everybody I had, ordered the damn salad. We have a big menu, and she showed that, what she liked and that she's passionate about the brand, and she totally gets us. And so I think that speaks to authenticity and really thinking through, what, I know it's a might be a light example, but I think, you know, it's always easier to interview for a company or any other role like that when you're crazy about the brand, and you believe in it. So.
Yeah, offline, I'll tell you all my thoughts about the Portillo's menu, but I love it, obviously. And I was one of those many people during 2020 that put my mask on and got in the drive-through and put the number on there. I have some fun memories of that. I don't know if they fun. I don't know if it was a fun time, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So now you're in this board seat, and you
Mhm.
in these board seats, I should say, and you probably see lawyers, outside lawyers, inside lawyers. So now you have this unique perspective that you're beginning to develop. What now that you see it, or maybe you always knew this, what are lawyers doing well in front of boards? What are lawyers not doing well? Yeah, curious about that.
Yeah, I've seen it. I even saw it when I was in-house, where you invite the really, really bright lawyer who's doing this really complicated transaction, and he got up there and whispered to the board the whole time. So
Whispering
I,
because just
I think that was his affect. I think he was nervous.
okay.
I also think he was over technical, and I think that's one of the biggest mistakes. I think try to, beforehand figure out what do you think the board wants to hear, because they should have read the materials. You're not going to drain every slide. I think that's pretty typical rule. But start with what does it mean for the company and the board. Again, I would emphasize it's not just about the legal outcome, although if you're dealing with certain litigation, they do want to understand it a little more deeply, but they, understand how far they want to go and prepare with the general counsel, and I would say the way I got the general counsel role was, one of my leaders was kind enough to say, you're going to come to audit committee meetings and walk through litigation. And so I had to learn that. And I think, starting with those small presentations and being successful at that will just give you practice. Even being in the room from time to time as a corporate secretary or as a temporary secretary can be helpful to understand how the conversations occur, what people are interested in or worried about.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably, and I think to your point about being a communicator and being able to, make things, you probably can never make things too clear at the end of the day. I mean, that's really probably important for people to be able to do. What's for a lot of people, board members, there's like a little bit of a shroud of mystery in terms of what board members are, what they do. I mean, what do you think people don't know? I don't mean GCs necessarily, but like somebody who's mid-level in their career and they're senior counsel, assistant general counsel, just starting. They just don't know a lot about it. What would you want them to know as they kind of embark on their career, starting to present in front of boards, et cetera?
Yeah, so think about what that person was doing right before they came into the meeting, right? They haven't seen you in 3 months. They just read some materials that were, one-dimensional materials. What is the color you want to bring? What do you want to walk, just focus on what you want them to walk out knowing. If it's, yes, we have risk with this particular matter, and this is what we're doing to mitigate the risk, make sure that that's up front and then repeat it at the end. It's a pretty basic presentation 101. They also want to know, did the company, did they do anything wrong? Could they have done anything differently? But, own that as well, because mostly they want to help the company get through it. They don't want to blame. So I think really think about what you want them to walk out with. There were situations where I presented to the board and I wanted the board's support on something. Here's what the board can do for me. Even now, I advise the CEOs that are on the board. I don't advise anymore. I offer that they really should come to a board meeting requiring that we deliver an answer to their questions at the end of the board meetings, that they're not just here to report to us, but we should help them solve some problems as well, or offer ideas. That's our role. So I think that might be things that people don't understand. They think it's some kind of, as you said, mystique. There's a ton of mystique around boards, but really, if you're doing it right, I believe is they're helping you solve problems, helping you see around the corner and prepare for the future.
Yeah, I mean, in our business, you'll send them an email, they won't respond for 4 or 5 days, and then when you nudge them, they're like, sorry, we were in board meetings or board prep or whatever, and I'm always like, oh, I totally get it. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what is that like? I mean, I think I know, but it's always funny when you get that, because it does seem like the world shuts down for a few days, either preparing of the meetings.
Yeah, it's an intense time, right? Because the board members, you have a very limited time with them. And so you want to maximize your time. And so there are absolutely no phones out during the board meetings I'm in. So nobody's multitasking. So yeah, you're pretty much missing in action during those board meetings. And many times the GC is the one who's running the show, making sure that the right people are in the right room, and making sure that the agendas are tight and that minutes are being taken. And oftentimes we become and even that people got the right non-allergenic food, oftentimes that's on us as well. So.
So you've had this, super successful career by any standard. What do you look back and you're proudest of? What do you I don't know if you ever think about those kind of things, but to the extent you do, what stands out?
Yeah, I mean, I'm most proud of the people I've worked with. Many of them have gone on to be even more successful than me, including you, right?
Oh, please.
I'm really proud of building certain processes in companies that I think make a difference for companies and their culture. A compliance culture that sticks, a D&I priority, people growth. Like I said, people who grow understand what they're good at, and what they should work on. I've worked with many people who are super bright but don't speak up enough, stuff like that. I'm really proud of having mentored some great lawyers. I think lawyers are just the best to work with, honestly. We're so diligent. We want to do good. We work hard. And I really enjoy working with other lawyers. Yeah, those are the things I'm proud of.
Yeah. And lawyers are awesome too. Most lawyers.
Yes.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you. You have this executive coaching practice, which I don't even think we've talked about at all. So how'd you get into that?
I'm just starting out, right? Just trying to, again, continue to make a difference. I think, I love a succession plan, and I love, young lawyers thinking about what's next for them. And if I have the opportunity to provide this on a more one-on-one basis to other young or up-and-coming general counsels, that's what I want to get done with that role.
I think you're a natural at something like that. You
Thank
seem
you.
You seem like somebody who would be a really good listener, who would give good, candid, sharp feedback. In other words, you're not too wishy-washy, but you also wouldn't be mean or anything like that. I think you'd be like a good happy medium.
Yeah, thanks. I try, and I do think it's important. I mean, you didn't ask the question, would I do differently? I would have recognized that, more about uh, listening to others about what I could do differently in my career. I think I did okay, but when your head is down, sometimes, even especially as a general counsel, when you're busy, it's hard for you to seek feedback. And I think having a built-in coach or somebody like that is really helpful, especially during those tough times.
I mean, this is, get 5 hour on this, but like, I think, there's somebody in my company who has done extremely well here and just amazing. And I tell that person that, maybe one of their top skills is that they actually take feedback really well and they actually think about it and learn from it, because there are, obviously we're giving feedback to people from their interviews, and there are a lot of people who just do not want to hear it. They do not. And so we know that. And so it's hard to tell them the feedback. So a lot of times we hide it. And then because if you do tell them, invariably they just get a little defensive and frustrated. And so it's really hard to give good feedback and to get the feedback and like learn from it.
Yeah, but I think it's so critical. And I think, the other thing I think, building those relationships where you can create trust for somebody to give that feedback is critical.
So just a couple last questions. So you're the perfect person to ask this question given the different roles you've had, but you look at the legal industry, you look at the next few years, the next decade or so, what are a couple of those top challenges that lawyers are going to be facing? Like if you're an in-house lawyer, again, just sort of beginning your journey, what would you say to them to be prepared, just for not prepared in general, but also prepared for what the next decade may bring that the last couple of decades didn't bring?
Yeah, I think, a couple of things. And it's funny, I was smiling the other day because people talk about the hybrid, and having challenges with people coming into the office. Before the pandemic, in truth, I would say, to answer your question, it's talent. Talent is, and somebody always says there's nothing new under the sun. Well, yes, talent is going to be the key thing, I think, because I think bottom line, our role is an apprenticeship role and a service role. And I think it's really hard to learn when you're not in the office or when you're not seeing people face to face or working side by side with them. And I think, getting our young lawyers right out of law school to get through that apprenticeship period in a way that will set them up for the future so that they're good general counsels, good leaders in the future is a challenge. I smile because back in the day, we had a hybrid environment in one of the companies I had. My philosophy was I didn't care where you were doing the job as long as you were doing it. And yet I even had a little podcast like you trying to take the shame out of working from home because I didn't want people hiding that they were working from home. It was really important to me that people felt comfortable doing that. But here I am post-pandemic saying it is important that you mix that in, that you mix in person and FaceTime, and not necessarily in the office, but go meet Mike, for lunch, have breakfast with him. Those relationships are really important. It builds trust. And I think that is a challenge. We got to get out of that constantly, that impersonal way of communicating with each other, because you're just a much more effective lawyer if you build those skills.
It's funny. I didn't mean to go down this hole, but I was just doing an interview like an hour before this, and this job is, it's a job that's it's in the office. It's just a job in the office. It is what it is. And this person wanted a quote unquote a hybrid, and what the person said to me was, I wouldn't want to go to a job that's 5 days a week and no flexibility. And I didn't think the interview was going great, so I didn't want to get into that. But what I want to say was there's really no job with 5 days a week and no flexibility. Like,
right.
Of course, people get that, like, doctor's appointments, kid stuff, life stuff, not feeling well, blah, 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 blah. But like also this hybrid, this clickety kind of thing. I don't know how well that's going to go for
I mean,
a
it's
lot of
not,
companies.
I mean, that's the thing with being a lawyer. It's not all, it's not one thing all the time.
I was going to say, yeah,
And
that's
you can't do what, if it's all about one thing all the time, then that's a problem. Because I've had to take red eyes and I hate them, because I couldn't be in the air during the day because there was a big deal going and I had to be in New York. And I remember showing up in my almost pajamas, taking a red eye to New York because I had to be on call as soon as I landed. So that is the nature of the role, and
100%.
you got to be flexible.
So
The other thing I would say is, but on the other hand, I think anyway, go ahead, ask your question. Yes.
I was gonna say,
Yeah,
that's
you
all
can
right.
get on with that.
I mean, that's the thing about the working issue. It's just it can be like it can be 20 hours on it, which is always interesting. So for you, so what's I don't know, I say what's left, but what's coming next for you? Are there any other big career aspirations you want to achieve? Anything kind of left on the table? You're so humble saying, oh, you could have done better, but you've had a super successful career. So what else
Yeah,
is
I
on there?
love
Or
being
maybe it
on
doesn't have to be a career. What else do you want to do?
Yeah, I love being on boards. I mean, I really am enjoying it. I miss having a team sometimes, but hopefully, what I try to do is take advantage of, being with the management team when I go to board meetings, and being of service to them, so that I can share. But honestly, I need to learn to take vacation. It's not something that is one skill that lawyers, and I think especially general counsels, don't know how to do. My husband and I went away last year, and I was freaking out that I wasn't that I wasn't when I wasn't in touch, and that's exactly what I need to learn to do in the next few years, is learn to take vacation.
You can come with us on one of our. No, I'm just kidding. I used to do with us, but yes, I think you deserve a lot of really great vacations, and you should totally do that. I'm going to finish. I should have said this earlier, and I forgot. I debated whether to say it, but I'm going back to our Tribune days. The one other thing, when we were there, I'm gonna date my experience with you, because the every day when I'd come to the office on a Monday, you and Dale would sit around talking about the X-Files episode from the night before. And I wasn't watching it, and I would hear you and Dale talk about it with such passion and breaking down the exactly and this, and I didn't know what you were talking about at all. I've since watched the X-Files, but that's when I think about that time, it dates it exactly. You guys are the original TV podcasters giving your reviews of those shows, so it was good times.
Yeah, no, that's a real indicator that it's so important that you have people in your, in your day-to-day work that you like spending time with, and you like, spending those moments with.
I don't know if there's still our water cooler talk but that was truly water cooler talk for sure. So, well, thanks, Paulette. I really appreciate you joining me for this. You were even a better guest than I thought, and I already had very high expectations. So.
You're kind, Mike. Thanks for having me. Good luck to you and to all your candidates and folks out there. This was a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, that will do it for this episode. We would love to get your feedback on these podcasts. Feel free to email me at msachs@mlaglobal.com. Tell me what you liked and what you didn't like, and any suggestions for future topics of episodes. In the meantime, our plan is to continue to roll out these episodes about once a month, so be on the lookout for new episodes all year as they become available. So long, everyone.
Thank you for listening to In-House Legal Uncovered. Join us next time as we dig into another topic that will better help you navigate your in-house legal career.